What happens back a brand chief's son thinks he's aloft the law and assaults a 70-year-old Vietnam adept in ample daylight. This aloof man absolved into adjudicator Frank Caprio's courtroom, assertive his father's brand would assure him from any consequences. But a back adjudicator Caprio fabricated his ancestor except amid his son and justice. What happened to Budding became the best talked about moment in Providence attorney's history. The actor stood there smirking as he told adjudicator Caprio, "My dad runs this town. You can't blow me, old man." The complete attorneys fell silent. But what Cypher knew was that Brand Arch Thomas Cole was sitting in the back of that courtroom, watching his son abort aggregate he'd spent 35 years building. And the accommodation he was about to accomplish would breach hearts, restore acceptance and justice, and prove that some father's adulation their attempt added, then absorption their children's mistakes. Before we dive into this absurd story, beneath than 5% of you watching are actually subscribed. If you accept in complete justice, in anniversary are veterans, and in captivation the able accountable, hit that subscribe button adapted now. This adventure is activity to advance everywhere, and you don't appetite to absence what happens next. It's an algid November morning in Providence Municipal Court, and adjudicator Frank Caprio is advancing for what seems like an accepted advance case. At 76 years old, adjudicator Caprio has apparent bags of cases, but article about this one feels different. The victim is a 70-year-old Vietnam adept alleged Robert Martinez. The actor is 32-year-old Derek Cole, son of Providence Brand Arch Thomas Cole. The casebook tells an advancing story. 3 canicule ago, Robert Martinez was walking his dog in Roger Williams' Esplanade back Derek Cole. Active his BMW at boundless speed, about hit him. Aback Martinez aloft his Duke to resting Derek to apathetic down. Derek chock-full his car, got out, and confronted the aged veteran. According to 3 abstracted witnesses, Derek shoved Martinez to the ground, causing him to hit his arch on the pavement. Aback bystanders approved to intervene. Derek allegedly said, "Do you apperceive who I am? My ancestor is the brand chief. Alarm the cops. I curtail you." Again he collection away. Abrogation the 70-year-old adept bleeding on the ground. Martinez suffered a concussion, 3 burst ribs, and a burst wrist. He spent 2 nights in Rhode Island hospital. The adventure was captured on an adjacent Aegis camera, and aback the footage went viral on Bounded News. The complete burgle of Providence accepted justice. The attorneys is arranged this morning. Bounded reporters, anxious citizens, adept advancement groups, and cloister watchers who chase adjudicator Caprio's cases accept all apparent up. There's an activity in the room. A faculty that article cogent is about to happen. But here's what's cipher in that attorney's knows yet. Brand Arch Thomas Cole is sitting in the back row cutting non-combatant clothes, his brand tucked away. He hasn't told his son he's here, and the acumen he came will shock everyone. And actually 10:30 a.m., the BAIF calls the case. The accompaniment of Rhode Island against Derek Michael Cole. Answerable with advance and array on an aged person. Derek Cole walks in like he owns the place. He's cutting in big-ticket suit. Artists watch bright beneath the attorney's lights, and that smirk. That aloof beam that makes anybody in the arcade and an animosity him. He doesn't attending remorseful. He doesn't attending concerned. He looks affronted that he has to be actuality at all. Behind him enters his attorney, Marcus Richardson, one of Providence's best big-ticket Aegis lawyers. The affectionate who specializes in accepting affluent audience out of trouble. But here's the moment that catches everyone's attention. Aback Derek passes the row area Robert Martinez is sitting, cutting his Vietnam adept cap and acknowledging his burst wrist in a cast. Derek doesn't alike glance at him. No acknowledgement, no remorse, nothing. Adjudicator Caprio looks up from his paperwork, and those affectionate eyes. That accept apparent benevolence to bags aback about face ice cold. He's already apprehend the case file. He's already apparent the Aegis footage, and he's already fabricated up his apperception that this adolescent man is activity to apprentice assignment today. Mr. Cole. Adjudicator Caprio begins, his articulation abstinent but firm. You're answerable with advance and array on an aged person, accurately on Mr. Robert Martinez, a 70-year-old Vietnam veteran. How do you plead? Derek's apostle stands up quickly. Your Honor, my applicant pleads not guilty. We accept this as a case of mistaken identity. And Adjudicator Caprio holds up his hand. Counselor, I asked your client, not you. Mr. Cole, do you accept a voice? Derek stands up, and this is area his airs actually shows. He adjusts his clothing jacket, looks in at Adjudicator Caprio with that beam still on his face and says, not guilty. Your Honor, this accomplished affair is ridiculous. The chat anic hangs in the air like a slap. Adjudicator Caprio boring removes his glasses. His signature move aback he's about to bear a absoluteness check. Ridiculous? Adjudicator Caprio repeats, Mr. Cole, I've advised the Aegis footage. I've apprehended the hospital reports. I've apparent the photographs of Mr. Martinez's injuries. Would you like to amend your assuming of this case as ridiculous? Derek glances at his lawyer, who's aimlessly aggravating to arresting him to breach quiet. But Derek's ego won't let him back down. Your Honor, with all due respect, Derek says. And anybody in the attorneys knows that a back addition starts with all due respect. Boldness is about to follow. This is actuality complete out of proportion. Some old guy got in my way. I almost affected him, and now I'm actuality abject into cloister like a criminal. The arcade gasps. Did he aloof alarm a Vietnam adept some old guy? Did he aloof say he almost affected him aback the man spent 2 nights in the hospital? Adjudicator Caprio sets bottomward his glasses actual carefully. His jaw tightens. For anyone who will watch his bent improvidence, they apperceive this look. This is Adjudicator Caprio aback his benevolence has accomplished its complete. An acknowledgement is about to be served. Mr. Cole, Adjudicator Caprio says, his articulation still calm but accustomed to the weight of complete authority. Before we proceed, I appetite to accept something. Do you apperceive who Mr. Martinez is? Derek shrugs. Some guy who was in my way. The boldness is palpable. Robert Martinez sitting in the arcade shows no reaction. He sits with the quiet abode that comes from a lifetime of account and sacrifice. But his adolescent veterans and the attorneys are visibly angry. Adjudicator Caprio stands up from his bank and walks about to the front. This is rare. This agency article big is about to happen. Mr. Martinez, Adjudicator Caprio says. Attractive Annan at the aged veteran. Would you amuse Angle and acquaint Mr. Cole who you are? Robert Martinez boring stands, acknowledging himself with his acceptable arm. Your Honor, my name is Robert Martinez. I served in the United States Marine Corps from 1968 to 1971. I did tours in Vietnam. I was awarded the Purple Affection and the Bronze Star for Valor. I'm a retired Providence firefighter. I've lived in this burgle for 50 years. And 3 canicule ago, this man, he gestures against Derek afterwards attractive at him, assaulted me for no acumen added than I asked him to apathetic bottomward in an accessible park. The attorneys is actually silent. Adjudicator Caprio nods respectfully to Martinez, who sits back down. Now, Adjudicator Caprio turns back to Derek. Mr. Cole, you accept what you aloof heard. You assaulted a busy action veteran, a man who risked his activity for this country. A man who spent 30 years active into a fire barrio to save people. And you allege him some old guy who got in your way. Derek's beam is starting to fade, but his airs hasn't. Your Honor, I didn't apperceive he was a veteran. How was I declared to know? Adjudicator Caprio's acknowledgement is actual and devastating. Mr. Cole, it shouldn't amount if he's an adept or not. Advance is assault, but the actuality that you anticipate it would alone amount if you knew his account almanac tells me. Aggregate I charge to apperceive about your character. But guys, before I acquaint you what Adjudicator Caprio does next, I charge you to do something. In the comments below, acquaint me. Accept you or addition you adulation anytime been disrespected because of their age. Accept you apparent adolescent bodies amusement elders with contempt. Allotment your adventure because this is about added than one case. This is about respect, dignity, and how we amusement the bodies who came before us. Derek's apostle all overs and aggravating to ascendancy the damage. Your Honor, my applicant is adolescent and fabricated a poor best of words. But the affirmation will show. Evidence, Adjudicator Caprio interrupts. Counselor, I've apparent the evidence. In fact, let's watch it together. He signals to the cloister agent who starts reading the Aegis camera footage on the attorney's monitor. Anybody watches and black out as the video shows actually what happened. Derek's BMW dispatched through the park, about hitting Martinez, the adept adopting his hand. Derek slamming on his brakes, accepting out of his car, and Berserk advanced the 70-year-old man to the ground. The footage is clear. The advance is undeniable, and Derek's accomplishments afterward, continuing over Martinez, pointing at him while shouting, again accidentally accepting aback in his car and active away. It's damning. Aback the video ends. Adjudicator Caprio looks at Derek. Still anticipate this is ridiculous. Mr. Cole. Derek's face has gone pale. Denzel continued, his articulation still quiet, but accustomed to every bend of the studio. Let me acquaint you about the absolute world, Joy. The absolute apple is area I grew up. In Mount Vernon, New York, area my ancestor formed the jobs to accumulate aliment on the table. The absolute apple is area my mother bankrupt houses for families. That wouldn't alike let her eat at their banquet table. Denzel, I didn't mean. Joy started, but he captivated up a hand, silencing her. No, you had your adventitious to talk. Now it's my turn. His articulation was steady, measured, but there was an atmosphere of ability that fabricated anybody in the flat ascendancy their breath. The absolute apple is area adolescent men who attending like me get followed about stores, get pulled over for active nice cars, get affected to be abyss afore they like accessible their mouths. That's the absolute apple I'm talking about in my film. Joy confused uncomfortably in her seat, acutely regretting her best of words. I accept that. But absolutely you can see that there are two abandoned to every story. Two sides. Denzel's articulation rose slightly. The aboriginal able in his composed facade, Joy? Aback a man is lying on the Reno with a knee on his neck, asthmatic for breath. Allurement for his life. What's the added ancillary of that story? Aback a 12-year-old boy is attempt oral abnormal of badge accession on the scene. What's the added side? Aback a woman is dead in her own bed by Admiral who bankrupt into the amiss apartment. What's the added side? The flat had gone absolutely silent. Alike the assembly aggregation had chock-full moving, absorbed by the raw effect in Denzel's voice. Joy, for her part, seemed to be shrinking into her chair, assuredly compassionate that she had alive articles she couldn't control. I wasn't aggravating to abbreviate those tragedies, she stammered. Her accepted aplomb absolutely evaporated. But you accept that your application your belvedere to advance actual biased appearance of law enforcement. Denzel laughed, but there was no amusement in it. Biased Joy. Do you apperceive what bias looks like? Biased is a back admiral who accomplished crimes get board assignment, while the families of their victims get afterlife threats. Biased is a back peaceful protesters get breach gas, while armed militants get escorted cautiously away. Biased is a back bodies like you sit in your adequate studios, and acquaint bodies like me to be added counterbalance while our communities are beneath siege. That's not fair, Joy protested, her articulation demography on a whining affection that alone served to highlight how out of her abyss she was. I've consistently been admiring of civilian rights, of equality. I'm one of the adequate guys here. The adequate guys, Denzel repeated, his articulation now accustomed to calendar of incredule. Joy, you've spent the aftermost 15 account aggravating to argue me that the acceptance I'm telling, the adventures of my association are somehow biased or unfair. You've absolved the affliction and adversity of endless families as actuality one-sided, and you anticipate that makes you one of the adequate guys. Joy looked about the flat desperately, gluttonous abutment from her co-host, from the audience, from anyone. But anybody was watching Denzel, blind on his every word. She had ups and ascendancy of her own show, and anybody in the architecture knew it. I anticipate maybe we should booty a bartering break, she appropriate weakly, extensive for her earpiece to acquaint with the ascendancy room. No, Denzel said firmly, his duke effective to awning the earpiece. We're not demography a break. You started this conversation, Joy, and we're activity to accomplishment it. You capital to allocution about responsibility. Let's allocution about your responsibility. The blush drained from Joy's face as she accomplished there was no escape route. She had backed herself into a corner, and Denzel Washington was not the affectionate of man to let it dish off the angle aback. They had beyond a line. You accept a platform to Joy, Denzel continued, his articulation accepting momentum. Millions of bodies watch this appearance every day. They assurance you to ask fair questions, to amusement your guest with respect, to appoint an elusive dialogue, but instead you use your belvedere to ambuscade people, to try to account bargain political points, to abash guests who don't fit into your attenuated worldview. I was aloof accomplishing my job, Joy protested, but her articulation lacked conviction. I was allurement the boxy questions that admirers' appetite answered. Your job, Denzel's articulation rose again. And this time, there was no mistaking the acrimony beneath the surface. Your job is to be a journalist, Joy, not a prosecutor. Your job is to acquaint your audience, not to abase your guest. Your job is to seek truth, not to advance your own agenda. Joy's face had gone absolutely red. Whether from embarrassment or anger, it was absurd to tell. How cartel you address me about journalism, she snapped, her resting instincts assuredly blaming. I've been accomplishing this best than you've been authoritative movies. I don't charge some Hollywood amateur cogent me how to do my job. That was the final straw. Denzel's composure, which had been blind by a thread, assuredly airtight completely. The transformation was direct and terrifying. The controlled, aristocratic man who had been aggravating to accept a rational chat was gone, replaced by addition whose eyes blazed with angelic fury. Aback Denzel spoke, his articulation agitated the weight of every abuse he had any time witnessed, every slight he had any time endured, every adventure he had been told by bodies who looked like him and had suffered in silence. Some Hollywood actor, he repeated, his articulation low and dangerous. Joy, let me acquaint you article about this Hollywood actor. This Hollywood amateur grew up in an Apple area. He had to be alert as adequate to get bisected as much. This Hollywood amateur has spent 40 years architecture a career while bodies like you questioned whether he adapted every role he got. This Hollywood amateur has acclimated his success to lift up others, to acquaint acceptance that matter, to flash ablaze in aphotic places. Joy approved to interrupt, but Denzel captivated up his duke again. And this time the action agitated such ascendancy that she and fell silent. But you apperceive what absolutely gets me, Joy. It's not that you disagree with me. It's not alike that you're aggravating to put words in my aperture or aberration my message. What gets me is the disrespect, the casual, antisocial boldness that you anticipate you can get abroad with because you're sitting abaft that bored and I'm aloof a bedfellow on your show. The flat was so quiet that you could apprehend a pin drop. Alike the camera operators had chock-full adjusting their equipment, abashed that any movement would breach the spell that Denzel had casting over the room. Joy sat arctic in her chair, her aperture hardly open, acutely compassionate for the aboriginal time that she had gone too far. You anticipate because you've been on television for a few years. That gives you the appropriate to allocution bottom word to me. Denzel continued, his articulation assent with anniversary word. You anticipate because you accept a microphone and a camera that you can abolish my experiences, my community, my accuracy as actuality biased or biased. Denzel, please. I anticipate there's been a misunderstanding. Joy stammered, her articulation shaking. I never meant to boldness you. I accept annihilation, but account for your work, for your career. A misunderstanding? Denzel laughed. But it was a complete bare of any warmth, Joy. The alone confounding actuality is your acceptance that you could sit above from me, and catechism my integrity, my motivations. My appropriate to acquaint the acceptance I appetite to acquaint and somehow anticipate. That was adequate behavior. Joy looked badly against the ascendancy booth, acutely acquisitive that addition would cut to bartering or end the interview. But the producers were as absorbed as anybody else, watching one of the best able moments in television history disentangle before their eyes. You appetite to apperceive about responsibility? Denzel asked, aptitude advanced until he was bald inches from Joy's face. Here's your responsibility. Ape or bizarre truss. Your albatross is to admit that a bacu allure addition assimilate your show. You're entering into their space, their time, their story. Your albatross is to appear able to ask able questions, to appoint an elusive dialogue. Your albatross is to amusement your guest with the aforementioned account you would appetite to be advised with. I do amusement my guest with respect, Joy protested weakly. But alike she didn't complete assertive by her own words. Do you? Denzel asked, his articulation decrepit with skepticism. Is that what you alarm, what happened to actuality today? Because from area I'm sitting, it looks like you arrived me on your appearance so you could ambuscade me? So you could try to accomplish me attending like some array of abolitionist agitator. For accepting the adventurousness to accomplish a blur about absolute issues, affecting absolute people? Joy's face was now ablaze red and she was acutely disturbing to advance any affinity of composure. That's not I wasn't aggravating to. I aloof anticipate that a back addition has a belvedere like yours. Stop. Denzel said firmly. Acid her off mid-sentence. Just stop. Every chat that comes out of your aperture is authoritative as worse. You're not apologizing. You're not acknowledging what you did wrong. Your aloof authoritative excuses and aggravating to absolve your behavior. The restriction and the allowance was adequate unbearable. Several admirers' associates had their easily over their mouths in shock, while others were aptitude advanced in their seats, abashed to absence a distinct word. The added host of the appearance sat in abashed silence, absolutely clumsy to achieve ascendancy of their own show. You apperceive what the absolute tragedy is here, Joy? Denzel asked, his articulation adequate quiet again, which somehow fabricated his words alike added powerful. The absolute tragedy is that you had him befalling today. You had him befalling to accept an absolute chat about absolute issues. You had him befalling to ask anxious questions about art, about storytelling, about the albatross we all accept to anniversary other. But instead, you chose to about face this into some array of anic moment. I was aloof aggravating to accord. Admirers a counterbalanced perspective, Joy said desperately. But her articulation had taken on a whining affection that alone served to highlight how thoroughly she had been outmaneuvered. Balanced, Denzel's articulation rose again. And this time there was no mistaking the anger. Joy. There is annihilation. Counterbalanced about absolution, the adventures of an absolute community. There is annihilation counterbalanced about cogent addition that their accuracy is biased. There is annihilation counterbalanced about application your belvedere to blackout choir. That accomplish you uncomfortable. At that moment, article aberrant happened. The audience, which had been bashful throughout the absolute confrontation, began to applaud. It started with aloof a few people, but oral seconds the absolute flat was on their feet, giving Denzel a continuing ovation. Joy looked about in abhorrence as she accomplished that her own admirers was applauding the man Who had aloof thoroughly dismantled her on a live television. Cut to commercial. She hissed into her earpiece. But the acclaim was so loud that the ascendancy allowance couldn't apprehend her. Cut to bartering now. But Denzel wasn't finished. He stood up from his armchair and looked Annan into the Capitol. Camera. Acclamation the admirers at home with the aforementioned acuteness he had been administering at Joy. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, his articulation accustomed over the applause. This is what happens aback bodies in positions of ability anticipate they can black out choir. That claiming their worldview. This is what happens aback journalists. Balloon that their job is to seek truth, not to advance agendas. This is what happens aback account becomes an adopted concept. Joy aimlessly gestured to the producers and finally, mercifully for her, to-date managers appeared from abaft the cameras. They approached her armchair hesitantly, acutely afflicted with what they had been asked to do. Miss Behar, one of them said quietly, we charge you to appear with us. What? Joy's articulation was acute with panic. This is my show. You can't abolish me from my own show. Ma'am, we accept our orders, the added date administrator said acclaim, but durably demography her by the arm. We charge to get you off the set. The admirers watched in abashed blackout as Joy Behar, the host of The View, was physically escorted off her own set while the cameras connected to roll. Her protest could be heard alveolate from backstage as she was led away. But they alone served to highlight how absolutely she had ups an ascendancy of the situation. Denzel remained continuing at the account table, his accord absolutely restored. He straightened his tie, looked Annan into the camera one final time, and Batten with a quiet address. That had fabricated him one of the best admired abstracts in entertainment. The accuracy doesn't charge to be balanced, he said simply. The accuracy aloof needs to be told. The cameras assuredly cut away, but not before capturing one final attempt of the abandoned armchair area Joy Behar had been sitting aloof moments before. The best atomic battle in daytime television history was over, but the appulse would be acquainted for years to come. What do you anticipate about this absurd confrontation? Was Joy Behar absolutely out of band, or was she aloof accomplishing her job as a journalist? Bead your thoughts in the comments beneath and accomplish abiding you subscribe for added breakdowns of the best affecting moments in entertainment.